bumper sticker reads. So we're very excited to be here because this is just, it's like Tiny House Christmas, or depending what you celebrate Hanukkah, Tiny House Kwanzaa. So this is going to be great. There's so many people here I've talked to online, through email, and just I've never met. Tammy Strobel, Logan, a few, there's a couple others here. It's just so cool to meet you guys in person. So we are very thrilled to be here. What we'll be talking about today is how to save money while building. A lot of the building I've done is fairly unconventional. A lot of it off-grid, off the radar, some bizarre, wacky, that's ridiculous, Deek designs. And I like to incorporate quite a few used, found, salvage materials, if anything, to keep them out of landfills, out of the waste stream. And it's free. Call me a cheapo, a thrifty SOB, penny pincher, what have you. Just growing up, didn't have a ton of money, and as a kid, when I was building forts, it's not like I'm going to drive out to Home Depot and buy a ton of lumber and build this awesome whatever. I was getting scraps from construction sites or finding stuff on the side of the road, and fast forward, 30 years later, and I'm still doing that and having a heck of a time doing it. So we'll be talking about, building with recycled materials to a certain degree, and just how to save quite a bit of money, alternative techniques. And I'll be passing the mic back and forth with my brother Dustin here, aka Dr. Demolition. My little brother, when we do workshops, which we co-host, anytime I need something lifted or broken, I bring him in. Or our buddy Max Damage, we call him, 6'10", 360. He's the guy when we need something destroyed. Whistle for him. Yeah, feed him raw steaks afterwards. That's the great thing. It doesn't work for cash. So I guess to start things, quick background on myself. I run a blog called RelaxShacks.com. Another one called FortAday.com. I'm pretty obsessed with tiny microstructures, kids' forts, and kind of bridging the gap between, small dwelling shelters, in some cases tiny houses, and whimsical structures that kind of dance in that realm between art and functional spaces, dwellings. And let's see, I host on YouTube Tiny Yellow House, a series I'm now doing, it hasn't aired yet, but a show for HGTV called Extreme Small Spaces. You think I could get the name right? Where we're kind of flying around, touring around, and shooting tours of some really unique, space-efficient dwellings, micro apartments, micro houses, and such. I got a book called Humble Homes, Simple Shacks. I brought a box of those up. If you want to pick one up, they're at a discount. I'll gladly sell you one so I don't have to cart them back home. I have a bunch of shirts too. Buy a book, get a shirt. It's my way of downsizing while you upsize. My wife's like, for the love of God, when will you get those shirts out of the basement? So it's from another website I used to run, but they're kind of funky, like rock shirts. But yeah, basically I run a bunch of blogs. I teach workshops for a Tumbleweed Tiny House company here and there as well, which is fun to travel with them. I'll be talking about some of that later too. They have a new design coming up. I'm not really certain if I'm supposed to talk about it yet or I'll be executed. No, it's really cool, called the Linden. Alex, you know about this. You're in the know with most of this. It's pretty awesome. So we can talk about that later. But what I want to talk about, I got a slideshow, maybe some Gallagher-style props over here. We'll be handing out ponchos to the front row for the explosions. We're going to give you a slideshow shortly. But my brother, I want him to give a little background on what he does and where he's come from.
As he had said, I'm excited to be here as well. My background, he probably always introduces me as an environmental engineer. I guess that's an easier term. I'm technically an environmental toxicologist. My background, I do have a day job. I work for a consulting firm, more so with the as-built environment. So I can answer any questions relating to indoor air quality, stuff like that, because I do work with hazardous materials in addition to indoor air quality investigation work. Where do we start with the...
He's my guy. If I pick up something that's awesome, I want to use like some windows or doors or some piece I want to salvage. Dustin, is this toxic? And he'll test it for me or look over it. He says yes, I'll put it in anyways. No,
we go back and forth. I basically collect a lot of stuff and give it to him. I'm more the minimalist. Like my place is pretty stark. He collects everything. He's got 100 hobbies. I do as well, different hobbies. But it's been fun working back and forth. We're about 40 minutes apart. A lot of days, I guess some weekdays we try to squeeze in building projects. Weekdays, weekends, we can dedicate a lot of time to it as well. So it's been fun.
In terms of some of the tips I want to convey to you guys, and this is stuff I learned over the years, we can dive right into things here. This is stuff knowledge or tips we've accumulated over the last, I've been building since The first cabin I built, it was a non-fort, was in 1987. I built in my backyard a tiny little dwelling that had heat, electricity, insulation, and I built it because at the time, some of you have heard this story, there's a couple people who've been to workshops of mine before. At the time, Nintendo first came out, and I was a little kid, video game addict, and there's no real noble reason for it, or highfalutin, profound one, but we grew up in a small house, one TV, my father wanted to watch tennis, I wanted to play video games. After a disagreement, I said, Dad, I'm going to build my own house in the backyard. And he laughed, so go ahead, have fun, thinking I wouldn't do it. And I did. I saved up money from mowing lawns and built my own place in the backyard to play video games. Yeah, it had a bed, hammock, shelving, everything. And it was a lot of fun. And I probably did everything wrong, but it was a learning experience. And that's what you got to do for those of you who haven't built before. Just dive into it. You're going to make mistakes, but that will be the way, hopefully not expensive ones, but that will be the way by which you learn. And I hope with some of the tips we give you today and some of the other builders as well, you can take the cumulative, 20 or more years of knowledge. I'm doing the math, 87 to now, it's quite a long span of building, but some of the mistakes I've made and nails I've shot through my hand and things like that, and hopefully you guys won't make the same mistakes. But as for saving money, we have a few, as we were prepping for this last night on a Wendy's napkin while listening to heavy metal and drinking beer, I think we're joking. We were discussing this a bit in the write-up because a lot of times he's so busy and I'm busy with things that it's tough to convene and jot notes down. But one of the tips I want to start with, there's a couple great books out there, a couple designers, some that are no longer with us. Rex Roberts was one of them. Jeff Milstein, he'll talk about him later, one of my idols in design, who was big on prefabrication. And Duo Dickinson. We grew up in Madison, Connecticut, in the shoreline, and from our hometown, there's this guy, Duo Dickinson. He teaches at Yale, has released a couple books on designing your own small house or space-efficient homes. They're expensive homes, but they're gorgeous. But he is a big proponent of designing using the stock lengths, where possible, of lumber. You're gonna frame a wall, use the full 8 feet, if you can. By doing so, you're saving materials. You're saving time in some cases, having to cut all the stuff and throw in a dump or use it as kindling and haul it away, but you're maximizing usage of that lumber. Caution, some lumber you buy at Home Depot or lumber anywhere, it's gonna be an 8-foot 2x4, 96 inches, measure each before you use it, because some of them will deviate by a ½ inch, in some cases 3/4 of an inch. If you go to a mom and pop mill, they can deviate by more. They give you some bonus wood. Sounds PG-13. But yeah, you can minimize waste by simply using the stock lengths of lumber. So a lot of times when I design a cabin, instead of making it, I'm gonna make it 11 by 7 feet, unless you're designing one in a trailer where you have to abide by the width of such trailers. My trailer's 7 feet, or Dee is a total expert on building on trailers. But she has a couple methods where you can kind of stretch the width of them. So you make it 7 feet 6 inches, but in the case of a ground-bound dwelling or whatever project you're tackling, it's ideal to take increments of 2, 4, 8. So you build something that's 8 by 10 feet. I actually brought a tiny little house on a trailer, calling it the Cub that him and I slept in last night. Both us fit in there, believe it or not. It's 5 by 8 feet, one pitch roof, so it's a little more aerodynamic. That later, if you guys want to stop by as part of that tiny house tour, it ties into this. There are a ton of recycled materials built into that. Some you wouldn't think, because they've been masked or coated with paint. But minimizing waste is one of them. I'm going to pass the mic to my brother over here.
I knew this microphone would be a difficult thing to try to get my some words in here. So he was talking about mom and pop stores. That's another way to kind of save money. A lot of people see it as being possibly more expensive, but from our experiences, the people we've dealt with, we've really developed relationships with them. More specifically, we have a place up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont here, and we've been going to the same place for in excess of, I guess, a decade now, 12 years, 13 years. I lost count, but anyway, you develop a relationship and you really can haggle with them, negotiate pricing, and like he said, they throw in bonus wood. They're getting rid of stickers or any types of, they have excess pallets. They just always call us up, or they have a reserve pile for us because they know we use everything. And as my brother has said before, we use every bit of the wood. It's kind of we call it the hot dog theory. Everything gets used. But even at my house, like any scrap wood I have, he's more involved with the projects. I have buckets, just 5-gallon buckets with scrap ends in it. They can be used as cleats. They can be used as hangers, blocking for interior walls between studs. Obviously, when the project's getting late and you need a little heat, you can throw it on the fire, if it's not treated, of course. So the mom and pop stores, I highly recommend them. Typically, you get a much better grade of wood as well. You go to the box stores, we refer to as rat wood. I'm the guy who goes in and looks down every single board. I can't get like a 2x4, looks like it's, you know,
Twizzler wood.
yeah, Twizzler wood. So I'll rearrange piles for them just to try to get decent enough boards that I don't have to bend and muscle into place. So typically from experience, we get, if you go to a good mill, they can have straight wood, it's going to be better grade quality. And what they call grade C up this way is much better than the highest grade at any box store that I've seen. So.
Yeah, we built a cabin in Vermont too that's off-grid. I bought land up there when I was 21 or so, somewhere in that ballpark. And him and I, when he was 18, we set upon building. You have to hike in to get to it. There's no electricity, no running water, kind of the way I like it, as you can see by my hygienic appearance right now. Good thing it's not smell-o-vision. But yeah, we quickly developed a rapport with this mill up there. And I'll give you the name because they've been so fabulous. I just want to, a word I never use, but I want to, you know, just pass it on. They're not paying me to say this, but what I like about the mom and pop mills, you get a high level of service. They know it's not some, you know, 13-year-old, oh, Mr. Diedricksen, what kind of, you know, who at whatever store. I won't, you know, trash talk certain stores, but they, these people know their stuff. They get to know you as a client. They set aside certain piles of bargain lumber for me here and there. You can, you mentioned you can haggle with them, or sometimes, you know, they'll just give you a break on bulk wood, and you're helping out a cottage industry, a family. I go to Goodridge Lumber in Albany, Vermont. Colleen Goodridge, this woman, once upon a time, set upon, I want to start a lumber mill, not realizing at the time how much work is involved with that. And it's grown into one of the more respected mills in the Northeast Kingdom. And it's her and her sons, and that's it. The place is amazing for tongue and groove cedars. I mean, stuff you can buy here costs like 10 times as much elsewhere, which is criminal. But moving on, just in terms of salvaging stuff, in terms of even not only materials, but decor as well. You know, when you're designing, building a house, your living space, decor is one of the elements too. You want to your needs, your stylistic tastes. I got it in my van. My van's packed with a lot of other crud right now too, but I have my salvage road kit. And I always joke, you know, when I start listing these things, there's a tarp, there's a crowbar, there's a saw. It sounds like I dispose of bodies for the mafia. I don't. I looked into it, the money's not as good as you think. Let me restart this by saying I don't actively look for the stuff. Here in the States, and elsewhere as well, it's amazing how many incredible pieces of furniture and lumber is just being thrown out, left on curbs. Windows, I have this stockpile of windows in my house that's approaching a Sanford & Son junkyard level. It's bordering on hoarding, but I do use the stuff. That's why I do some of these workshops, like I gotta use this stuff and build something with it. But I drive around, I usually have a tarp, so in case it's raining out, you don't get your vehicle all muddy, so my wife won't kill me. I have, you know, crowbar, screwdriver, let's see, gloves so you don't get yourself cut up, hammer, drill to back out screws, a couple other things. Like a Leatherman, like a multi-tool, those things, if you're building on the job site, they are worth their weight in gold. Get a good one too, not those like Husky, like Lowe's makes the Husky brand one, use it 3 times, it falls apart. It's only good for scrap. So get a good one, that's where I recommend you actually spend the money. But just by driving around, I have found some, I could talk for like hours upon some of the things I found and incorporate it into builds, or just fixed up, or not even fixed up and resold on Craigslist. It's like American Pickers, the Deek redneck version, where I've taken the stuff and resold it on Craigslist, and with that money, I've then used it to buy materials I couldn't find. And one story is I worked for this guy. I used to be a licensed home inspector in Massachusetts. I didn't get like fired or anything. I just didn't want to do it anymore. It got depressing with foreclosed homes and people being kicked out of their homes. I didn't want to deal with it and see. I didn't want to be part of that environment. But this guy I worked for, he was remodeling his house and sparing no expense. You know, Brazilian cherry floors and all, you know, redoing everything. He even took all the doors and the trim out of his house simply because he didn't like the particular hue of the stain and wanted it lighter. Didn't want to take the time to strip everything, so he got rid of all these 6-panel pine doors, trim, everything. We're talking like a dumpster load of stuff. He knew I was a picker of sorts. Speaking of which, I don't have anything hanging on my nose. I keep looking at the camera like, oh yeah, I gotta watch the language on camera. I haven't dropped a swear yet though. But materials, and that's another key, get the word out there amongst friends. It spreads fast. I have people dropping stuff off my driveway, which is a curse and a blessing depending on what it is. He had this dump, yeah, my neighbor is like a little overzealous. Like, I thought you could use this giant bag of asbestos. So like, the thought was there. But he was throwing away all these doors to get back on track, and I saw them like, oh my God, I will take those. So 2 truckloads, he had a big house. He added on to it, by the way. He lives by himself. So I don't know how much money he spent, it's ridiculous, beautiful house. But so I took all these doors and I used them when I finished part of my basement, used all the trim, I've used it in several cabins, and I took the excess doors and sold them on Craigslist for $2,000. Money I spent on beer. No, I funneled that into some projects I have going on in my own home because I bought a fixer-upper at the time that would have been classified as a tear-down just about, and I've made it my own over time with a lot of recycled materials. So a road kit, having one, just being ready when you happen to drive by something on your way to drop the kids off at soccer, on your way to bingo, or wherever. You know, you see a window on the side of the road, if you got room, grab it. Just make sure you have room to store it ahead of time or it can get out of hand.
Yeah, going along that, he's definitely a picker. When I'm starting a project en route, it just happens the town he lives in, they have a trash collection, my town doesn't, I have to go to a transfer station. But driving off the highway to his home, I always see stuff on the side of the road, and anytime I bring up, hey, Deek, I saw plastic pool stuff, we could maybe use it. He's like, I already saw it. He has everything staked out in his town. I guess his route to soccer practice is probably, what, 10 miles longer than it should be. Dad, I missed the game again!
That's a sweet window on it.
Or I'll meet up with him for lunch or something like that. I work in Boston, we'll meet up and I'll just see, there's barely room for me. I have to, put windows in the back. He has me move stuff around. We're picking up pallet wood. So we have all these side kind of adventures, which is a lot of fun.
Am I talking about pallet wood?
Oh, going on the restores. There's also stores out there. He had mentioned Craigslist. I go on Craigslist a lot. I bought a fixer-upper. Enough for a family of 4. I'm not going to say it's tiny. It's 800 square feet. I live in a coastal town, so I really put all the money toward the location. And with that, I've slowly been accumulating some materials, mostly free. He had mentioned pallet wood. I just redid a mud room, and I used all pallet wood there. Be careful with
on
it.
The walls.
Yeah, on the walls. I didn't build a whole addition out of pallet wood. So it's on the wall, so it's a decorative piece. It looks great. I kind of lighting angle toward it. It's beautiful. I stained them different colors. It looks great. What else did? Oh yeah,
Pallet wood I want to mention. Yeah, you talk about it because I'm flapping my gums a lot here.
You're probably going to mention pallet wood. Be careful. A lot of them should be stamped, and if you see HT, that's kind of the route you want to go. That stands for heat treated. And the other one, you may see MT, that's indicator that some type of fungicide was used, likely in different country of origin. So yeah. I wouldn't trust that.
When they ship the stuff overseas, they want to make sure there's no invasive pests inherent in the wood, so they have to spray the living heck out of some of these pallets with fungicides, methyl, I forget what it is.
To ensure that they're not bringing more Asian longhorn beetles into our beautiful forests. So pallet wood it's a lot of work though. I've seen people who've done some beautiful work with it. They've done all their floors with it. Michael Jansen from Tiny House Design, a great site. He was or has been building an entire tiny house out of pallet wood. I think it's like Free Pallet House or Alex. Where's Alex? What's his site? FreePalletwood.com, Free Pallet House Cabin, something.
I don't remember that one, but tinyhousedesign.com you can find it.
Yeah, tinyhousedesign.com. It's pretty cool. But a site, pallets, there's a couple ways to dismantle them too. There's the caveman way with a sledgehammer, but that only produces kindling. There's the, let's see, you can lay a pallet down, because if you ever wrestled with pallets before, it's like, oh, this is way more work than it's worth. Forget this, I'm going to Home Depot and spending 2 G's on bad wood. But This video brought to you by Home Depot. You should have told me. With generous sponsorship from Lowe's. But pallet wood, you can lay a pallet down, and there's more or less 3 stringers holding all the slats together. And if the quick way, if you take your circular saw and cut just to the inside of each outlaying stringer, or that inside 2x4, sometimes 2x3, you'll lose a little wood, but then you can just take that board and rock it off the center support and pull the nails very easily. You're losing wood that way, but you pull that stuff off. It's a campfire for later at night. Another method is to use a sawzall with metal blades. That's what Michael Jansen does. I've used that method before, very quick, you get the full board. Unfortunately, you start burning through sawzall blades after a while, cutting metal nails, but it does work very well. You can get a pallet ripper, or what are they called?
Pallet buster.
Pallet buster. I did a workshop in North Carolina recently, and this guy, Apollo Coleman from Cambridge, he brought his pallet buster. You can order them through, I think, Northern Tool. I've seen people who can weld, do metalworking, have developed their own. I gotta get one, because I'm like, oh my God, what a fool I was all these years. He's just busting apart these pallets into usable pieces. Pallet wood is great though for makeshift trim wood, quite a variety of things. The little tiny house, again I'm calling it the Cub, but we were joking, we should call it the Smurf Mobile. It's like bright blue. And playing that Smurf theme song everywhere we drive, like a creepy ice cream man. There's some pallet wood incorporated into that. And there's actually the whole interior roof of it is done with rich man fencing board, I call it. One town away from me, there's this neighborhood of these really expensive houses that I drive by occasionally. And after Hurricane Sandy, this guy had this gigantic 8-foot fence that was like, God, like 3 miles long. Sections of it had blown down, and he was just heaping the whole entire sections in this, in this pile. You ever see the movie Wicker Man, with Christopher Lee? It looks like he was gonna have some giant, like, pagan bonfire with them. So I found where his mailbox was, which is about 3 miles from his house, because his driveway was so long. This guy must have been so loaded. And as a crew was starting to install new fencing, I left the note in the mailbox. And I do this a lot of times. I tell you, about 80% of the time, people get back to me, and they're more than willing to give the stuff to you, because they don't want it to go into a landfill either. A note, hey, my name's blah, 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 and I noticed you had a bunch of wood. If you happen to be throwing that out, or a bunch of fencing wood damage from whatever, if you happen to be throwing that out, could you let me know? I would like to use it for whatever projects. And these people usually end up either calling me to say, come on over, you're doing me a favor, because now I don't have to rent a dumpster and pay by weight to dispose of it. Or you get some people like, leave me alone, you creep, get away from my mailbox. No. It's very rarely do I get people who say no. So if you write a nice little note, not like, give me that wood now, sucker. Not that you could convey that in a letter. But anyway, so I went out there and I got 2 entire trailer loads of true, meaning 1" by 6" spruce planks that were in awesome shape. And the nail gun they used to put this fence together was a joke. I can't imagine how much he paid for this, but I had asked for my money back. So I had this mountain, you'll see it in a photo if we get to the slideshow at some point. You'll see, this slideshow is actually my backup, because I'm notorious for having slideshows that don't work. So usually I just talk, obviously. But this, I have it's like a lumber yard in my backyard right now. It was, again, like Christmas. Dismantling decks at Craigslist. You'll find a lot of people just, man, woman needing deck torn down. Sometimes they'll pay you to do it, and you get to keep all the wood. And in some cases, the decks aren't that old, and it's a jackpot for building materials. But do you want to talk about the plywood flooring technique?
Yeah, sure. You will. So, I guess for saving time and money, a great option, we've done this in a lot of our builds, is just keeping a plywood floor and feeling it out and letting it wear out naturally. With our Vermont cabin, we originally had a plywood floor. We put how many coats of poly did we put on? 30? No. Probably 5 coats of poly. But we lived on it for a while. We were just trying to save money, and it's perfectly acceptable to kind of walk across it. It takes some wear. If you paint it and it wears out, you can just repaint it. And I guess afterward, you can put down the hardwood flooring once you have the money saved up. Specifically with our Vermont project, he had mentioned he was all of 24, bought land younger than that. We paid cash for property. I was 18. We had no money. We were both in school at the time. So that was a good way to save money. We were kind of paying as we were building. So it did take a while to get there, but we used a plywood floor.
Lloyd Kahn, if you're familiar with him, he's got one of the best tiny house books out there. Next to Humble Home Simple Shacks, available after this. Lloyd Kahn, if there's anyone I look up to in terms,
If there's anyone I look up to or have been inspired by in a great way by, alternative architecture, Lloyd Kahn, I mean, since the 70s, he had this book Shelter, and there's David and Jeannie Stiles from New York City, author-architect duo. Which is like a dream gig for me. David is I believe in his 70s, so him and I are what? I think he's 80 now. I don't want to say this on the camera in case he's like, I'm only 50, damn. But he was one of the guys I was hugely inspired by and looked up to, and now we're actually working on a plan set together for a micro-transforming A-frame cabin you could build for $1,200. So I'm trying to go the route where you can even using some new materials build a lot of stuff on the cheap. Because I know a lot of people like, oh, you could build this house or, a house in a trailer for, depending on the model, there's 15, 20, 30, whatever $1,000. A lot cheaper than building a McMansion, but still, in terms of immediate cash outlay, that's quite a bit of money. So what he's getting at with the plywood flooring, our technique is to build in increments as the cash and time will allow you to. The plywood subfloor, for a while or forever, is your flooring. If you have the proper joist spacing underneath, it's going to hold you up. Later on, if it starts getting beat up and scratched, you spill too many, there's coffee rings on it, you spill paint and such, and it looks like heck. If it doesn't give you that rustic look you've been looking for, then pick up where you left off and put your real tongue and groove flooring on that. So you save time and money by doing things in increments. Free paint's another thing. There's down near us in Cape Cod, Wellfleet, Massachusetts, there's Newton, Massachusetts, a couple places I make sure I swing by if I happen to be in the neighborhood. They have these take it or leave it, you can talk about yours too, they have this take it or leave it little buildings where people dump stuff off they don't want thrown out, but it's free for the taking. They have dedicated sheds to just paints and stains. I went to this place in Newton, Massachusetts with my kids. They have no choice but to become salvagers and pickers when they grow up. Dad, are we going dumpster diving again? Yes, son, yes. You go in first. Scout it out. He's 6. But paint and stain, these places, I went to this one in Newton and I left with multiple cans of mid-wax stain that had never been opened. And all these fairly expensive high-end Benjamin Moore paints. Simply because you have to realize a lot of people, if they move out of state, let's say, they don't want to bring their paint collection with them, so it's hazardous material, they dump it off, and these people are more than happy to give it away. Now you're thinking, Deek, a can of paint, what is that, $25? Yeah, it's $25. If you start adding these things up, over time you start saving a heck of a lot of money. You'll see in my little cabin later, little bunk bed in there, I call it baby puke green. That's a free can of paint I got. I kind of liked it until I applied it. I'm like, I don't know. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But stain, all the stain in there, free can of stain. And it just goes to show if you look around and know the avenues of freedom, I mean by free stuff because other people are dumb, you can get, I just made that up right now. You can really cash in hardware. You want to talk about doors on the side of the road? Some of the, well, I just said it, I guess.
Doors on the side of the road. I said. He was saying, I live in a coastal town in Massachusetts, Situate, south of Boston, and I guess the bait to get my brother out to help me with projects around my house, I'm like, yeah, if you help me out, we can kind of swing by. I got the transfer sticker on my vehicle because it's town residents only, and he can go picking through what the people leave in the area, and from that we've gotten countless items. And they call it's the village of Greenbush within Situate, and everyone refers to it as the Greenbush Mall. So they do have a take it or leave it section, it's great. I've gotten a full outdoor, I think it's cedar, yeah, it is cedar, Walpole woodworking company. Those aren't cheap. I have a full, 6-piece set.
Like outdoor furniture, yeah. Someone's throwing it out because the stain was just a little off or scratched. It's like in new condition. Well, we looked it up at one point in time, and it was well over $1,000 for the set. Someone's just like, I don't have time for this. In swoops him and I with the superhero capes and the mask, yes, for salvage.
So that was one of the earlier projects that you had worked on, because from that particular set, we had kind of arm wrestled what we were going to get out of it. I got most of the pieces, and he got the kind of the recliner that later became the Hick shot. I don't know if people had seen that in the video, but that's I think that's episode 1 from your
my tiny
YouTube
yellow,
site.
My tiny yellow house show, which I started doing by accident because my brother-in-law's in film. We built this little festival for Burning Man, little camper thing. They could move like a wheelbarrow but sleep in. I didn't use tape measures. I just lie down it's a little over 6'4". I could fit in it. Let's go. But the base of it, and I don't touch upon it much, it's actually built from a I beefed it up with some supports, a cedar deck recliner. I used the wheels and everything. That's the base of that little structure.
Well, let's start the slideshow, which I wasn't sure if I was going to use or not. Paintbrushes here. Yeah, you got to use the pause technique here. You just messed it up. Yeah, sure. All right, he's got it. Oh, there you go. This is one of the thinner houses I've ever seen. Yeah, you should have just left it. All right, just pause. No, just leave it right there. No. All right, here, real quick before we lose this slide. This is in northern Massachusetts. Here's a great example of just repurposing an old trailer from a truck, and this is Mantown. You can see a little smokestack there. You're killing me, brother. I could be like the Micro Machine Man rushing through these. You can see there's a little wood stove here as well. And a great example of taking something and making it into something else. Just leave it alone. Right. He's actually good with computers, believe it or not. Here's an example. This isn't building your house. All right, real quick. This is a little homeless kiosk I built that doubles as something you can bring to a flea market that's made out of all street-side recycled materials, from the plywood to the tuggy roof cedar right here from Goodrich Lumber in Albany. Some of these mills actually throw away some of the scrap ends or stuff that's not high-grade wood, or you can buy a truckload of it for kindling for like $20, and I mean a truckload. I call that building materials, choice building materials. This window in the back here, it's an office water cooler jug. I spun it through a table saw. I'm acting it out again. And it worked kind of well. The R value is like absolutely terrible. But for a little seasonal shack that I could lay down, and yes, it worked out. Added a little flair to it. Those are tomatoes I'm growing, by the way. This window here was free as well. You want to do your thing, or should we not? Pause it quick. This is the little loft space of our Vermont cabin in the woods. And, rug free. Oh, that was like a hand-me-down. This is the stairway down to the lower level. Here's a great example of awesome wood in Vermont where you can haggle and it's reasonable as opposed to other states, rip-off land, I like to call Massachusetts. These are true 2x6s or 2x8s. They're cedar. Usually you wouldn't use cedar for rafters or as dimensional structural lumber. This is a redneck cabin in the woods that I built, all etched on like I said, literally, actually, I joke about this. Someone asked me for plans of this cabin once. I said, it's on a Wendy's napkin somewhere in a landfill. I love free-form building. But all these blocking pieces, those were scraps. We went to a mill, and let's see, let's say there's 10 of those, because there's some on the outside as well with the barge rafters. I said, I need a bunch of cedar rafters. And the guy pointed out a pile. I said, later I count, I need, let's say 10 of them. How much would that be? $40. It was all I could do not to dance a jig, that was a terrible jig. And $40 for all of them. You can't buy one of those anywhere in Massachusetts, let alone for $40. They don't sell lumber like that. And it's rough, it hasn't been sanded down. And we joke, we call it the splinter ceiling. You wake up in the middle of the night with a nightmare and you get splinters in your forehead. But it works very well. Same with the cedar flooring here, all those windows. In fact, every single window in my Vermont cabin, and there are a lot of them, pulled from a dumpster. I happened to be driving by one day, this woman's remodeling, a bunch of storm windows lined up, and I stopped and asked her, excuse me, miss, might you be getting rid of those windows? And she was actually super cool, funky, and into the whole recycling thing too, but had no use for them. Gave them to me. Not only that, she said, can I take your number? Down the road, we're doing more remodeling, I'll give you a call, because we'll have more windows and other stuff. And sure enough, she did about a year later. Every single window in this cabin, actually except for one, I'm lying. We ran out, we were short one window, so all the way from near Orleans, Vermont, we had to make a Home Depot run to Burlington, which was like an hour and a half away, which was a total pain. Scenic though. But every single window, just going to show, if you look around or ask, is from a dumpster. Oh, the chair, yeah, this is just, I love saving stuff. This is my grandfather's long deceased favorite chair. I usually get the question, Deek, how'd you get the chair in there? The stud spacing and such, it looks impossible. We actually brought it up there, knowing we put it in there, then built around it. So if someone wanted to, not that they want to steal an old 1960s moth-eaten chair, but if we wanted to get it out of there, It won't even fit through the windows. It looks like it could in this picture. It will not. We'd have to cut it in half. You want to talk about the diner?
So this is the exterior shot of the Vermont cabin, which the locals there have dubbed the Albany skyscraper, which is pretty tall. I think, what's the standing height from the lowest
We
corner?
built it a hill from here, and I know this because I measured when I was doing the roofing, I fell off the roof. But from here to here is 26 feet.
So the original reason, it's a stick-built kind of construction where originally we put the platform up to approximately 10 feet. I think his wife was arguing the fact that she wanted higher to feel safer from bears. I think a bear could climb
Turn for like a half
that,
second.
but just to kind of keep things quiet, we did do that, and you can see that there is a sleeping structure underneath, which is only half. The platform is 10 by 10 in itself, the original building, and half of that on the bottom side, which is maybe 4-foot headroom. It's about the size of a queen size mattress or so. We dubbed that also the coffin. And as you can see, there's tin flashing outside of that. We quickly learned, I should say, that there's a lot of porcupines up this way, and they are a nuisance. You can see it's plywood sheathing. They do have a salt deficiency some part of the year, and they will take that apart. We had tried other things. We painted with hot sauce mixed into some of the stains. That didn't work. It was a joke. So what we had found, the only thing that had worked, and I had joked with my brother, and I was really against him, thought, okay, we can try everything else. We can scare them off. They'll have to come up more often, and just we don't get up there all too often. And during the weekdays, the porcupines could have very well been eating our cabin, which we had found out they did eat our outhouse completely out, where there's, I think it's up like 3 feet, there's no wood, so when someone's in it, you can see their legs. So as a fix to that, we had corrugated metal roofing, and we just put it on the outside of the outhouse as a kind of a Band-Aid, and now we dubbed it the bomb shelter, which is pretty fitting in many ways. And so looking at this, here's the tin flashing, and we do have a sliding window there, so as a joke, at first we said it looks like an ice cream stand, you know, you can slide the window open, you got the metal, like an old 50s diner look, so we also call it the diner, the lower part of the cabin.
These posts are also collared too, in aluminum, some of it recycled. We've actually found, we found
from a neighbor on one of our other tree houses out there, one of the poles we set, some newspaper masters, like the ink masters, which are more or less aluminum, so we recycled those. And at one point in time, you could read a couple of the cool little headlines on them, like newspapers from the 70s, but no longer. But yeah, when we started putting this in, he was like, oh man, it looks like a diner in the woods. You weren't too thrilled, but that's the only thing that's worked in deterring the porcupines. If you live in Vermont, they can be very detrimental to what you're building, to lumber. If you leave, they say, an axe handle out from the oils in your hands, they'll eat the handle clear off if given enough time. And one other thing to point out before we attempt to move to the next slide. This plywood here, again, this is my proving grounds, or stomping, or just experimental outdoor layer here. It's just recycled plywood. Some I got from a friend, some, I think a couple pieces I purchased. I was 21, I had like no money. We just coat the heck out of it with a waterproofer every year or so, and it's been there for like 13 years or so. It's great and has a little mildew here and there, but it's held up very well. Because a lot of people are like, oh, that's ridiculous, plywood siding, he's smoking, he's on the pipe again. It's held up very well. The cabin we have out there, it's one of those phase things. Right now, it's just exterior plywood sheathing, which later as time, desire, or money allows, I might add shingles to it, or corrugated roofing as a siding. It's just, I don't have the money right now, the time, or the desire. Let's take things one phase at a time. Was that my scatterbrain? Oh, this is the interior of it. A lot of recycled. These are we did this. Yeah, that's all, folks. We did this floor here, Goodrich lumber again. I forget. It was so reasonable. It's cedar. Some newspaper masters, like the ink masters, which are more or less aluminum, so we recycled those. And at one point in time, you could read a couple of the cool little headlines on them, like newspapers from the 70s, but no longer. But yeah, when we started putting this in, he was like, oh man, it looks like a diner in the woods. You weren't too thrilled, but that's the only thing that's worked in deterring the porcupines. If you live in Vermont, they can be very detrimental to what you're building, to lumber. If you leave, they say, an axe handle out from the oils in your hands, they'll eat the handle clear off if given enough time. And one other thing to point out before we attempt to move to the next slide. This plywood here, again, this is my proving grounds or stomping or just experimental outdoor layer here. It's just recycled plywood. Some I got from a friend, some I think a couple pieces I purchased. I was 21, I had like no money. We just coat the heck out of it with a waterproofer every year or so, and it's been there for like 13 years or so. It's great and has a little mildew here and there, but it's held up very well. Because a lot of people are like, oh, that's ridiculous, plywood siding, he's smoking, he's on the pipe again. It's held up very well. The cabin we have out there, it's one of those phase things. Right now, it's just exterior plywood sheathing, which later as time, desire, or money allows, I might add shingles to it, or corrugated roofing as a siding. It's just, I don't have the money right now, the time, or the desire. Let's take things one phase at a time. Because I'm a scatterbrain. Oh, this is the interior of it. A lot of recycled. These are we did this. Yeah, but that's all, folks. We did this floor here, Goodrich lumber again. I forget. It was so reasonable. It's cedar. A lot of times people don't use cedar.
Well, cedar's a softwood, so people say you're crazy using it, but I think it gives a little bit of charm. There's some nicks in it. You can also put a poly coat with a hardening layer to make it more or less equivalent to a hardwood. As you can see, most of the interior, we have the rough cut cedar on top, cedar finishing tongue and groove for the floor. We just used what was available to us. Again, this is from Goodrich Lumber. Everything milled is within 50 miles of their sawmill as well, so that's as sustainable or as green as you can get. If you look at we have a ship galley type stairwell leading up to the loft area. I guess I have wider shoulders than my brother, so it's a little bit of a challenge for me to squeeze up. So that's the incentive we always had said. If we can't fit up through that little opening, what's the spacing on the rafters? It's like 2 feet.
Not even.
So not even. So that's the incentive to try to get up through that.
We know we're letting go if we come up next year and we can't make it through there. We're trying to cut back. But you want to talk about some of the space-saving techniques?
Yeah, so space-saving techniques. Right here, this is a drop-down Murphy bed. You can see there's a dartboard up there.
Salvage wood, plywood, some other, it's like a calico effect. You want just like all extras and boards I found.
And I guess the term that's commonly used is turniture, so it's furniture that turns into something else. So that's great for...
From ugly wall to bed.
Dartboard.
Yeah, dartboard, I guess.
Right here is another, I think this is a flip-up table. It is a flip-up table. And you see how we extended the lowest step, so that doubles as a seat, which is perfect. We've built in shelving. This is typically wasted space behind a staircase, especially one that steep, but you can just reach through and we put the books there.
Coffee tables, if you ever have any of them, make sure they're ones, unless you want a visual space underneath, that you can store things within. This was built with absolute free wood, like cedar again. Even the trim, I love putting darker trim on things, just rip a couple pieces of cedar through a table saw, pre-stain it, gun it on, tack it on later with some finishing nails. Pretty much everything we furnished in here as well is all like yard sales. We found people, we had a video in this one, and there's so many comments like, dude, Deek's pretty bold having that bong out on the table. It's an old, it's an old lantern. I am obsessed with little lanterns for some reason. And we were driving on the way up, and I can't pass a yard sale. Just look, you never know. And I found this one very recently. This is the camp mascot, my dog, Orzo. And recycled roofing back here, which has a lot of rust and patina on it.
The Nordic stove.
Yeah, it's not in operation right now, or that chair would be on fire. But there's a Nordic stove that heats it, which is gravity fed. They use those in Swedish fishing boats. It's about the size of a fire hydrant, pretty affordable. Runs in kerosene, gravity fed. So if you lose power, no problem, man. Terrible impersonation.
I have this bin of, like I said, all these toys and stuff here, but that was just in case the slideshow didn't work and I developed laryngitis and he was playing D. Oh, this is hokey, some of these ideas, but they do work, especially in an application where you're building like a seasonal getaway or you want to put one in a shed. You've probably now seen some of the videos where people make those, they cut through the roof of their shed or house and put in a water bottle. Problem is, you try to do that in Vermont, when it freezes, that thing's expanding, messing your roof, the seal around them, breaking the bottle, it's spilling into your house on your very valuable comic book collection. Not from experience. No, I haven't actually messed with that, but what you could do is add a little, they have some clearer varieties of antifreeze, that might work. Much like a Trome wall for passive solar, if you've ever built one of those for thermal mass, you take like a giant black barrel, so it won't freeze in the winter. Add a little bit of biodegradable RV antifreeze to keep that barrel from freezing. This is a pickle jar. I like pickles. My son's a fiend, so we have quite a few of these. It's simply traced in passing through a 3/4 inch plywood wall. By doing so, natural light and storage in one, not furniture. That was a term that Lester Walker, another one of my idols, created. Furniture that serves 2, 3, 4, or 9 functions. There's stuff out there like that. Lester Walker wrote a book called Tiny, Tiny Houses in the 80s. He was really a proponent for this thing before it was huge like it is now. And the guy he's incredible. The book, I highly recommend it. A little bit expensive. You might see it on Amazon, like, I don't know. It's worth the money. Get his book. But I always felt, when I traveled this little cabin on the road, I use it for storage, but I always thought it'd be cool to actually put some moss in there and make it a terrarium. So you can actually see through the wall, and it's like an art piece in essence as well. These are just more like kiddish shelters I built. Here's a tactic, found window, but where you can protrude, extend, have your windows cantilever. A lot of areas the building code is judged by the floor square footage. You can't have a structure over 8 by 8 square feet, but what if I have these huge cantilevered windows and bays with flying buttresses holding them up? And no, don't go to that length, very expensive. But you can gain a lot of visual space and storage space by popping out those windows. There's a guy in California, forget his name, who recently came up with a tiny house model based on that idea. Everything's popped out on each side. It looks like a giant, Rubik's Cube. This is hokey too, but it's just an example of don't look at materials for their face or regularly intended values or purpose. This is like a pasta pot lid, water cooler jug, things like that. If you're building a little kid's fort or cabin, there are things you can incorporate in there that are certainly conversation pieces as well. This is a tree house I built in the Catskills for a woman, and typically I find I built a lot of tree houses for people, although not technically a true tree house. Poles, I hate using poles in tree houses, but I couldn't help it in this case. When I do tree houses for people, a lot of times I find that they call me and they're embarrassed to say that it's for them because they're an adult. I rarely get calls from 5-year-olds. Hey, Mr. Diedricksen, can you build me a tree house? And this woman initially, I want to build a tree house for my niece and nephew, but I want power in there. I want to make sure there's an armchair, and I want to make sure there's a this and that. And someone thinks, you sure this isn't for you? All right, you got me. So this is fun. I mean, it's triangular, it's not super space efficient, but at night when lit up, it looks like some spaceship from Close Encounters of the Third Kind or Contact, one of those alien movies. Mine is the chest bursters. That's for the sci-fi nerds out there. Oh, this is in there as well. I hadn't finished it in this picture. A recycled, thick salad bowl or punch bowl mounted upside down in silicone. Bird feeder hangs underneath, so when you're sitting there in your armchair, voyeuristically you can look down, the birds don't see you. They're on a feeder swinging underneath, and you're 2 feet away from birds right near your feet, feeding. It's pretty cool. Doesn't look too gorgeous, it wasn't done. Just an example, I suppose, this one was painted, but finding don't be afraid to, if you find a salvage piece that's particularly interesting, to design your house around a window or a door you happen to find. Say you find this beautiful Gothic window, you look at Jay Schaefer's first Tumbleweed, he has that beautiful, not recycled, but that Gothic window. That thing's street curb appeal wise, that's the selling point right there. I think it's gorgeous. I found a window a ways back that was about 4 by 8 feet, 32 lights, panes. And when I saw it on the side of the road, I didn't have a plan for a tree house, but right then and there I said, that will be in a tree house, oriented vertically. It will be like a lantern in the woods. So don't be afraid if you find a particularly interesting piece, especially if the price is right, that being free. Don't be afraid to design around that. Be flexible while designing your tiny space. You have asymmetrical or windows that don't match. Don't write off putting in an asymmetrical haphazard pattern of windows. It looks pretty amazing sometimes. Just at least sketch it out, try it out. You might be surprised. It doesn't have to be all repetitious and carbon copying. Oh, tell them about those windows.
Yeah, so those windows, I frequently go on Craigslist, and the original thought was I was going to do a owner-built addition to my house, a small addition, a sunroom, what have you, but 2 kids later, I ran out of time. I decided, okay, I'm going to pass off these windows to my brother. I had gotten 6, I think it was, in total, 7 in total windows that are approximately, I think, 3.5 feet by 6 feet. Those are, I think, rated for 200 miles an hour or something. They're Anderson windows. They were only a couple years old, and I had picked it up from a pretty affluent town along the coast, and they were just renovating and didn't like the look of them. So I think I had gotten it down to $300 for all of them. So since that time, we had used one of them in our Vermont cabin, which looks unbelievable. Another build that he had done with the neighbors, he built a greenhouse out of them. There's probably a slide coming up with that, I think, as well.
But the moral of the story being, too, these windows typically, if you ever purchase Andersen windows, they're close to like a G a pop. And we get 7 of them for like 300 or 300 and change. He actually saw those. It's good to know people. I mean, I know him through birth, so I have no choice. But he saw him picking them up, knowing they would be useful. And again, with Craigslist or finding used stuff, it pays to really scout and scavenge in the well-to-do towns. Like I mentioned Newton, Mass, or his town. I forget, getting fake IDs for whatever else. I want a fake ID for the town dump sticker. I've actually thought about it, so I can just roll in there. Living an hour away. You're not allowed unless you're a citizen of that town. Just an example of just some found hardware.
This one looks like crud, so not a great example. But again, things for their, this we did use in the door, but using pieces of hardware for purposes aside from what they were intended for. You can take a lot of these and make some cool little coat books and coat hangers. Like carrot top like prop bin on a couple cabins. I find shovel heads. People are always too rough with their shovels when digging, thinking they can jack up a car with them and snap the handles. I have a bunch of these I painted different colors. You can mount them on a nice piece of oak with some trim, a couple screw holes through them on a wall, boom, coat hanger. But one that's kind of a conversation piece. Some may say, Deek, that's very strange, but I've done it before and got a lot of polite comments on it. But I mean, again, it's just looking at a piece you found and what else can I do with this? This is a little kind of shed cabin we built for a show on the History Channel. Kind of having some fun with some circular holes we cut in free and or found windows, free cedar for a deck, free wood for a flower box, quite a few other things. Free is the operative term. This was in a warehouse where we were building this for the show in Brooklyn. And I just like this. I took this picture because I just love the look of this. The wood doesn't all have to be the same color or match. That has a lot of character, I feel. A white door, boring. Like look at here, Yestermorrow. Look at some of these doors that they've made with stained glass and different patterns. They're beautiful. They're art. So it's art and a functional door, passageway in one. A lot of this I found out later was made from recycled barn board and pallet wood. So again, right there, the price is right, and I think it looks pretty nifty. This is Dustin chilling out in a tiny 8x8 cabin. This wasn't quite done. It's like a little art studio. It's not a tiny house. But here's an example of we bought some higher grade plywood for the walls as well. And it wasn't treated or poly coated there to protect it, but plywood can look pretty cool if you just leave it be. OSB particle board, which is pretty much like chewed up cookie crumbs they glue together. That stuff is garbage and gives off a lot of VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Not a fan of it. It's particularly heavy too. Some of the MDF boards, things, medium density fiber board. So if you're building like a tiny house on wheels, I stray away from that kind of stuff. But plywood, you can leave it be and save quite a bit of money. Down the road, when you beat up this floor, add another floor on top.
You can talk about time constraints we have with this project.
Oh yeah, I mean, quick story on this. Yeah, this was prefabricated. The whole thing, there's a seam down here that's kind of hidden. It's all in 4x8 foot pieces because I got a call about 2 or 3 days prior from the History Channel for the show they were doing a special based on the obsession with Americans with space and stuff, and they wanted something that represented a tiny little getaway art studio cube, and they said, could you sketch something for us, can you design something for us, prefabricate it, drive it out to Brooklyn, assemble it in real time on film, then take it down and drive it back to Boston. We need it in 3 days. It's like, oh my gosh. So while watching 2 kids, I managed to do it. They did some of the painting. You don't see it here, but. Oh, hey, these are washing machine front loader windows. I've used these quite a few times, and people are like, I love that porthole window. Where'd you find that thing? Beautiful. That must have cost you a pretty penny. No, I find them at the dump. My transfer station, the old timers there, I know them on a first name basis. They set this stuff aside for me at this point. Like, that's my dream job, to work at the transfer station. I'll just never unlock the gates. I just keep it all to myself. So those things are great. I mean, the glass is pretty thick in them. You can use them as little funky porthole windows. My cabin out there, I didn't have time. I literally finished the wiring on it like 15 minutes before he arrived last night to drive up here. We arrived at midnight. I wanted to put one of those porthole windows up in the little loft or bunk area. It will happen at some point. I'm gonna let you take over because this isn't my house, it's yours.
So this is my house, the sunroom. One thing I'd use, this is an old, this wasn't my utility room originally, but I needed that space there. I already had my own tool storage, which they were using kind of wood cabinets for, so I just took it off and sat it down and put pillows on it. I thought it looked great. It's just, again, I'm trying to use everything. The original intent was my wife thought that it was going to go to the transfer station, and I just couldn't part with it. I'm like, I don't want to waste it.
What kind of wood is it? It's something high-end, right? It's not teak, but it's, you said?
Brazilian mahogany.
Oh, is it?
No, I'm joking. It's a teak. It's a teak. So it is.
Madagascar ironwood.
This is the pallet wall I had done. I guess it's an extreme close-up. If you step back from it, it's on a pitched area with a higher ceiling. It looks great. It's definitely, it's one of my, it's very time-consuming because you see I puzzled it together with all different types of pieces here.
I told him, I said, just orient it all the same way. You'll have it a calico look, because all the boards weathered differently. He said, no, I want to puzzle it together. I said, I'll see you in 2 years.
You gotta be selective with the pallet wood that you're picking up. A lot of times you can see different types of, I guess, mold on it, so that's a serious concern. You don't want to introduce that and having it releasing fungal spores into the interior environment. So what I have done was, I really was super selective since this is an interior space. I sanded it, I wiped it down, cleaned it. I also put a coat of poly on, which you need to put more on, but really seal it in. You can buy packets of like I guess an antimicrobial agent that you can use as an additive that helps kind of thwart the growth of mold as well. Because anytime if you have, I'm near the ocean, so it gets humid, I get a lot of moisture coming in, so that's kind of is more susceptible to mold growth. And I always leave my windows open. I don't have my house air conditioned, I just have a natural breeze running through it. So that was a concern I had to consider. And I guess if you're lucky as well, I don't know if you had mentioned pallet wood, sometimes you can strike gold and get oak. If you're kind of hanging outside of some places that transport heavy machinery especially, a lot of the stickers or the spacers on the supports are made out of oak, which is great.
You'll know when you pick it up, you can barely lift it.
You gotta fight people. That's why we bring the crowbar with us, just so we can fight the people for the oak. This is, I think, was this from the Dollarama or Dollar Store? So this was just a serving tray that he had used as a window, and it looks great, and the light passing through it just reflects in the small cabin. I don't even know what cabin this is on any longer.
Oh, there's a cabin, the Gypsy Junker, that built experimentally out of almost nothing but roadside found materials, from forklift, pallet wood, to even a heater in it was built out of like tin cans, an old cymbal to reflect heat, a dryer vent. It worked kind of like a hurricane lamp, and it worked pretty well. That design used to be in my book, but when I finally got a publishing deal, I pulled it because I didn't want to like entice people to like dance with fire, knowing something could go horribly wrong. It's worked for me very well, though. Oh, this is an example of a.
Give that to me.
Where's my windows?
I feel like I should hang out over there, but the mic cord won't reach. I'm like neglecting Seth and the crew over here. This is in a greenhouse I built / writing retreat for a horror author in Massachusetts by the name of John Grover, twisted individual. This, to save on costs because they had a limited budget, here's some of those Anderson windows you can see. This is before things were pertified, putting lipstick on a pig, they call it. This pane right here was, I see people throwing these out all the time, those stereo cabinets with the spring latches. I find those huge panes because they're made out of this cheap MDF or fiber board, and that gives, but the glass is still good. So I grabbed a couple of these here and there, siliconed it in place, and then trimmed the inside later. This is just showing the bones of it, and it worked very well. That's another tip. One thing I do not cheap out on, or try not to, is sealants, silicone caulk, things like that. You get the DAP cheaper stuff. It doesn't cure as quickly as if time is of the essence. That cabin out there, I put some of the DAP stuff on, acrylic based with a hint of silicone. And a day and a half later, it still didn't cure. And when we had rain, it was just dripping white everywhere. The stuff that's supposed to dry clear. I used the GE brand silicone, which is almost twice the price, but that stuff is rain ready in 3 hours. So I don't like, and Robin, when we did the workshop in North Carolina, that's what Stephen Harrell, when we were building his place, I said, make sure you get the GE silicone stuff. It works so well. Don't cheap out on that stuff, or you'll be doing it over again. Copper piping, another thing. Usually don't recycle that for plumbing, because it's the old dated stuff. There's still lead inherent in the solder, and you'll be acting a little bit goofy down the road from drinking too much lead-laden water. Outside of part of the greenhouse that wasn't quite finished. But here's those Anderson windows just lined up like ducks in a row. that cost me pretty much nothing, but they're high-end windows and provide this huge, cool glass front. They open as well. Door found on the side of the road. This roofing, people ask a lot. It's Tough Tex poly roofing, very flexible, lightweight. They make a roofing material now called Ondura too, which is made of 50% recycled material, and it can withstand wind loads at 200 miles per hour. And it's made in the USA, something you rarely hear anymore. So same with this Tough Tex stuff.
I carry that.
Yeah, Lowe's carries that. Yeah, Home Depot does not carry Tough Tex. Actually, you take the mic. I have a sample I can pass to people, I think.
Or maybe I'm lying.
I don't even know what this photo is of.
Improv!
Oh, is this out in Washington?
Yeah. Okay, here's the samples of that poly roofing, just so you can see. It's very thin, lightweight, and it goes on so
He's
easily.
talking about this.
Not that I want to push plastics, but you know, you gotta pick and choose your battles. It's worked for me very well. Okay, I visited, here's some good space-saving techniques mixed in with money-saving and recycling. This guy's like a mad scientist slash tiny house genius. Goes by the name of Hal Colombo. It is his real name. You can stay in this place, Airbnb.com, which is airbedandbreakfast.com. Great way to try out tiny spaces. Try it before you buy it or want to go to that lifestyle. It's in Seattle, and he's got a green living roof on the place. It's 68 square feet. You can stay there for $60 a night, right in Seattle. It's got a bathtub in the floor. There's a hatch. So I've never seen a 68 square foot house with a bathtub in it, let alone like a tumbleweed or a travel trailer with anything like that. Pretty clever. The kitchenette spot, make sure your socks are clean. Later you ascend here on the edge of the table and go up to a sleep loft. And this right here is a padded chunk of a garage door with a reverse garage door opener at the push of a button right here. It goes from a padded wall, swoops down, a leg kicks out and becomes a bed. So here's a full-size bed, bathtub in the floor, and a wet bath as well. A wet bath, for those of you who might not be familiar, a lot of the tiny house space-saving, I call it technology, is ripped from the nautical world, boating. A wet bath is a room that is, you know, your toilet stall is your shower as well, because the whole room is made waterproof. Oh yeah, oh no, is there a slide for that? There might be. Yeah, oh perfect. This is a wet bath. I was ahead of myself. He calls this his vanity mirror. It's a side view mirror of a van, an old Econoline, Dodge Econoline. I thought that was clever. Window he found on the side of the road. Couldn't find a small enough sink, so he made one out of his salad bowl. He's got this little old-fashioned farm pitcher. The water comes down into there. Floor is slightly sloped into the drains. When you shower, it drains quickly and properly. He used some greenhouse, I forget the name of the material. It's got like a closed cell within this greenhouse paneling. Has these sliding doors to close that and a privacy screen as well. Both myself and Christopher Smith from Tiny the Movie, who might be stopping by later today, we stayed in this place and we fit in there. It's 68 square feet. But Airbnb.com, it's I've stayed so many funky, cool places, tree houses, things like that. It's a great, if you're traveling, it's something to look into because you can stay in these places and right in front of you, there's a million ideas to be had, to glean. This is a cottage my grandparents had growing up, recycled nautical rope from a ship on a little hanger there. I like it because it's easy to grasp when ascending the stairs. It gives a little bit of character, you know, it's kind of creative, and it doesn't take up much space. And you say, oh, Deek, that's, you know, save an inch or two. But in a narrow staircase in your tiny house, every inch is going to count. You may think that's ridiculous, but it's true. So that folds flush against the wall instead of being out an inch and a half or so. Oh, this? Okay. Now this is just, it's not rebuilding with recycled materials, but this is, I just took this picture. It's at my house in Connecticut where I grew up. My mother has these little flower boxes. Got sick of like buying expensive plants and taking care of them, and just put an assortment of rocks in there. I'm like, it's a rock garden. I'm like, it kind of looks neat. Like it's, my mother's very artsy and clever, and she just peppered it with a couple little accent plants here. And I just thought it was kind of cool. Here's me taking after my mom with a tea kettle hanging from one of my cabins I found on the side of the road. At one point in time, that was on my wood stove to humidify the air. I'd heat my house with wood. Here's some of that forklift pallet wood, siding the Gypsy Junker cabin. This is up in Vermont. This is, what are you doing?
I got a heavy finger.
This is in Vermont, a cabin we were working on at one of the hands-on workshops I was doing. My dog hamming it up, posing for a picture. This doesn't really show it, but some of the base and some of the other parts we used, again, recycled materials. Budget-friendly, off to the side, clipped off. One of the reasons we had the luxury of putting in a ton of windows which I wanted to do because the surrounding woods were just gorgeous, the way the light filters through the trees, all these little saplings. We have windows everywhere, and at the workshop, I had a design in mind, but let the group collectively pick the window placement and change the design so they could be part and parcel of the whole experience. But these are all going to be windows only because I had access to a ton of free windows. Otherwise, I might have cheaped out a bit. Like, listen, my budget's only so-and-so. Forget about it, we'll put one window in the front. But we have like 10 windows in this thing. Onward. Another shot where we got part of it sheathed. Oh, here's some of the windows as well. This guy here, the big dude, that's Bill Rockhill from Bear Creek Carpentry. He was so helpful in this build here, I named the cabin, which we're still working on, the Rock Hill. Happens to be next to a giant rock and on a hill, too. I think it's named after him. Another shot of the window at night. Light radiating through, little cool accent piece. Just make sure you silicone it if it's an exterior one. I might not do it in a travel trailer because of wind loads and rain. You don't want to be driven through, but I silicone the edges, and that stuff works pretty well as an adhesive and sealant. Okay, this is in a kindred spirit. This is in, I go up every summer to Maine and stay in a home-built cabin on my wife's side of the family by a lake, and they have, this is one of my favorite parts, every few days we go to the town dump, transfer station. And this was a guy, it's like that common bond too. I was talking to Logan from Rowdy Kittens about this, and it's this common bond, you know, like when you meet fellow musicians, you instantly have something you can identify with and talk to them about. Same with salvaging junk. He looked at me from distance and I gave him the secret club salute. It's the wink with the kick. No, I talked to him later and he was just picking materials and he was saying the same thing. He's like, it's ridiculous. They come in with a bulldozer and destroy a house because they don't want to take the time to pull it apart. Some valuable materials, building materials that could have otherwise been recycled. Older houses, some of that trim work and crowd molding, that stuff is worth a fortune. There's a place in New Bedford, Massachusetts. I was there recently to purchase the door in the cabin out there. And it's 80,000 square feet. They have something like 3,500 used doors. And you walk in there and realize, like, my God, if it weren't for these kind of places, they're making a killer living off it. All this stuff would be in a landfill. And this is just regional. 80,000 square feet. You could play football several times over in this building. It's pretty amazing. But this guy was saying, like, it's a shame the stuff's thrown out. He was picking through there. He had a pickup truck, throwing boards. I talked to him for a while. And I later went down there and got all the stuff he missed. Some pretty choice stuff. The next. So here, someone at the transfer station had left several buckets of nails. That's something if you're planning your build quite a bit ahead of time. Let's say you pick your date to be a year from now, I want to start building. If you have the luxury of time, start, if you have a place to store it, start planning and harboring materials. That could eventually bite you in the butt if you collect too much stuff because you now have the added burden of covering it with tarps or storing it. But nails, they don't give them away. You go to any of the box stores, you buy 5 pounds of nails, just the common shiny, they're gonna rust in 5 days nails. They're like 20 bucks a box. I'm always on the lookout for bargains. There's this store called Martin's in Maine, Waterville, Maine. Stuff that fell off the back of a truck that the mafia didn't want. And a lot of times they have these pallets of nails, these 50-pound boxes for $7 a pop. Suffice to say, I own about 500 pounds of nails in my shed. But I'm getting through them. Just another example of bargains. When you build houses like a tumbleweed or travel trailers, this is called a tension tie to keep it from racking and being squished as wind loads are hitting it when traveling down the road. Simpson Strong Tie is a company that makes these and sells them in Home Depot for $32. This one, which works just as well, I just happened to see a shelf of them, and the rest of them are down there. You can see stuff moves quick at Martin's. Someone saw those and grabbed many of them, or they're just not really good about restocking things. These were $4 each. So I'm like, I'll grab a few of those, and right there is a savings of $28 a pop. Building a tiny house on wheels, you might need 6 to 8 of those. So there's some money saved. Call me cheap, I call it smart and not wanting to give away my money. This is one people either love or despise, so I think it's kind of funny. These are just recycled pipe fittings and bicycle inner tubes to hold books. If you're traveling down the road, a lot of people who are book collectors are like, oh, don't ever do that to your books. These are like 10-cent books I found at a thrift shop. But, you know, it's kind of like, it's boating meets really ugly, weird art. If you're traveling on the road, these aren't going to fall out, believe me. Like stretch band shelving. This is my son in the woods building a tree house with free stickers, which are the little boards they dry wood out with when they stack it. A lot of times at lumber mills, they give that stuff away. I can't tell you how many times I've used that for cheap trim on cabins. because they're usually an inch, inch and a half wide. Cedar, if they don't give them away, they sell them for 10 or 15 cents a pop. In Massachusetts, thought this was pretty clever, an old galvanized farm pail made into a sink. Drain in the bottom, I don't know the shot, but adds a little bit of flair, character, oomph, I think is the technical term. Another cabin I built, I found when I was cutting down a tree that was on its way out for some firewood, there was this branch with this particularly interesting Salvador Dali-like bend, and I made a little lantern hanger for it in one of my cabins, scrap piece of plywood, stuff that was destined for the dump, little trim pieces. I save little thin trim pieces all the time. You never know when in a bind when those could be made useful. I just think it's kind of fun looking, in a Timothy Leary sense. This is part of my backyard redneck Oompa Loompa village. Some microstructures I'm just playing with and using recycled materials to build. This deck right here, same guy I used to do home inspections for, he was tearing down his deck. Paid me to do it at like 15 bucks an hour and didn't want any of the stuff to pay for it to be disposed. 2 truckloads later, it's the base of one of my cabins in Vermont. It's a little deck with a step here in my yard. It's been used so many times. Bullnose decking, pressure treated. That stuff is rather expensive. The stuff was only 8 years old. He just wanted it out of his yard. And I swooped in again with the superhero mask. These next slides will be out of order, probably with one in between them because my slideshow is in disarray. No, it's all right. I do a lot of Craigslist, wheeling and dealing, like I said, to make some money for my projects. And I'm pretty good at finding stuff that I know has some future value in it with a little bit of tweaking. These were a set of bar stools. I had 2 of them. It took me, I think, 25 minutes to just quickly coat them in stain and let it dry because they were scratched up. Someone was using them as sawhorses. And I sold them for 65 bucks on Craigslist. I'm not retiring off this money, but to me it's kind of fun taking something, here's the top of them before, with a can of free stain, by the way. So you spend a little time, you can make a little profit on it to funnel into your endeavors of your tiny house. Bunch of windows that have been chucked. Here's a side shot of that huge one I could use in a tree house. Metal roofing I bought off a woman who had actually a very cool house, clad the entire very modern house, like, probably cost $2 million, featured in Dwell magazine. She had galvanized metal roofing as siding and had all these extra pieces, just wanted them out of sight. I got them for pretty much nothing. They have roofed about 3 of my cabins, and a chicken coop I built. There's that cabin we built in Brooklyn, now in my yard. Great example of salvaging or recycling. When we built the cabin, I knew afterwards they would want nothing to do with it. We're in Manhattan, where are you going to put that thing? So they let us take it apart and keep it. It's now in my yard, and I've pimped it out just a little bit. And when I do workshops, all these little cabins in my Oompa Loompa redneck Mad Max wasteland village of a backyard, say that in one breath 10 times fast. Those are where the people get to stay and hang out. Or when it's raining, we use them as little discussion group cabins at times. I was just drawing out some paintbrushes here and looked at it. I'm like, that's kind of cool looking. If I got some other colors, I could mount those on a board and sell it to some rich sucker. This is in Vermont as well, a tree house I built for him, like a tiny one, and we built in like a day and a half. Prefabricated, hauled into the woods. When he turned 30, I figured instead of giving him like a gift certificate to the Olive Garden, I would build him and his wife a little tree house they could stay in when in Vermont, so they wouldn't have to stay in the main cabin with all us noisy farting drunks. The bowls right here, again, glass salad bowls, I made myself. They were inset, traced on plywood, inset with silicone into the rings, then I cut, they're about 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick, and then mounted them from the inside, and they become these little porthole windows. At night, there's a lantern in each, and these little things kind of represent almost fangs on the door. At night, when lit up, it looks like this crazy, weird, voodoo temple in the middle of the Vermont woods. I'm sure many a hunter has, soiled himself stumbling upon this. Oh, it's called, so the cabin name, it was for his 30th birthday, it's called the UB30, very profound. It's inscribed inside, it says, if you ever come to my Vermont workshops or to stay up there just to hang. It says, happy birthday, happy 30th, Dustin, you old bastard. Here's a tree house for you, something to that effect. Just scraps of wood I paint on, these weird things. My wife is very tolerant. I got weird art things hanging everywhere, and she's, I don't know if we'll get to the slide, because I don't know what we're doing for time. Keep going forward. I want to show you one thing that she's especially tolerant with. Not this, also this, though. This is inside the cabin that was in Vermont. I like to make and collect art out of scraps. Little cameo of to give Lloyd Kahn. a nod right there. Example of making trim with furring strips or batten wood. You find it at Home Depot for $1.49, an 8-foot piece. Instead of buying the stuff that costs like $1 a linear foot, you find some more select pieces. These haven't been sanded out. You still see some silicone there. It doesn't look too terrible. Recycled board. This is a foyer in my house I used for storage. Example of supports to bolster shelving from my heavy tiny house book collection, made out of storm wood that I just stripped the bark off, polyurethane. It has kind of a unique or interesting look to it, and it's free. My wood stove, recycled wood, screen window. And this was, I call it my wood stove Alcatraz in my house to keep my young kids, or at the time they were very young, everyone starts out that way. And this was to keep them away from the wood stove. This is front screen that swings open. And this screen right here, in the winter, the kids love it. Instead of them eating Skittles and whatever, Big League Chew for breakfast, I lay down some dish towels and buy apples at the supermarket, even the ones that are like a little bit past their prime, soak them in lemon juice, lay them on the towels and dehydrate them with the wood stove. It makes apple chips. I cannot keep my kids away from them before they're ready. I'm swatting their hands away, and they're really delicious, and it's just an example of more recycled junk. There was a game in the 70s or 60s, 70s called Skittle Ball. All the local thrift shops, I know most of the people by name. I saw this, it was, separate from the set. I'm like, oh, that would make a cool, mounted to a wall and a wooden disc stand, like a lantern hanger. Or if I ever went into the legal field, a gavel. There's a couple uses. I brought this to one of the workshops, and as an exercise in creativity, I said to people, what could you do with something like this? Paper towel holder, rolling pin for dough. There's quite a few things. I just thought it was very interesting looking where, in a mid-century modern sense, I could actually hang it from a ceiling, cut a notch into it to hang a lantern, or mount it out, outward, horizontally from a wall to hang a lantern. Just something different. Oh, my neighbors are very cool too. They don't call the cops on me too frequently. This is a playhouse. Those swing sets you get, I forget, Creative Play Spaces, something like that. They cost so much. I look at Craigslist, someone was giving one away if I would haul and dismantle it. Then later added onto it with scrap wood and forklift pallet wood. And it's like in that movie Waterworld with Kevin Costner, but it's in my front yard. This was an example. I love retro or throwback books. I was in the Boy Scouts. I was an Eagle Scout, and when I can, I speak highly in the Scouts because I thought it was just a great experience, despite the bad press they get sometimes. Went in some amazing campouts and stayed in a lot of tiny cabins and places. Part of my upbringing. That's why I'm so fascinated with tiny spaces. When I was growing up, example of cheap art. To take book covers, something like this. What I'm going to do with these is actually pressure mount them horizontally in a shelf, so not only are they mounted in by pressure as art, but you can actually take them out when you want to read them and plug them back in place. So instead of buying some fancy schmancy mounted framed print at TJ Maxx or wherever, not that they're too fancy, but I got these for like 50 cents each. Don't build a tiny house out of those though. Forklift pallet wood, this is the top of a coffee table. I have a video on this now. I just took the pieces and with some excess spray paint, a couple cans I found, just lightly hit them with some spray paint. I didn't want it to look too fancy or to be too colorful or too thorough with the color so that the grain and some of the knots would bleed through to give it more of a rustic look. Coffee tabletop or a weird wall hanging. You could put it on hinges, almost medicine cabinet style, to hide things behind it. Things you want. Oh, here it is, on my deck. This is a box. My neighbor works for an aerospace company, and he knows that I like building with junk. So they ship titanium parts for aircraft, for planes in these. And he gets these boxes all the time. So I make coffee tables out of them and leave the print on them because it's kind of interesting. Titanium, grade 1. This flips up. There's storage within. These are pipe fittings, end cap, 8-inch pipe, and there's a flange underneath to mount that leg into the bottom side of the coffee table. Right there. I'm ahead of myself yet again. Door I found on the side of the road. You'll find these all the time. It's an exterior door, only a single pane. When looking for doors and windows, a couple things you don't want to pick up or ones you want to stray away from, depending on the insulated value of your home or its intended use. If it's just a summer place, single pane is going to work. Double pane, though, is what you want to look for. If there's fogging between the panes, that means there's been a vapor barrier breach. So they're no longer airtight. There's no vacuum between the panes. Those aesthetically aren't going to look so great either. They'll be fogging nonstop. It'll look like your house from the exterior is a sauna. Unless you're going for the Swedish sauna look. But with these type doors, with a little paint and touch up, they'll look great, and I use them in certain projects. If you find, did we touch upon this?
Yeah,
Crap doors in the hardware, did you mention that? You see a lot of hollow core doors on the side of the road. Don't overlook those, look closer. A lot of times people leave all the hinges on them, coat hooks, some of them fancy, or with older doors. If the door is beat up, save those. Yeah, if you can find those old crystal doorknobs. I was just at that salvage place, they sell those for like 70 bucks a pop. So old-fashioned doorknobs, there's a market for those. Old-fashioned hinges, there's a market for those, and you can reuse them. Even modern hinges, you go to any store, some of them like the 4-inch hinges, 3-inch hinges, they're a couple bucks each. Now, if you need a couple doors in your tiny house and you found a ton of those, that's one less thing you have to pay for, and you kept that out of the waste stream. Example, the stamp Dustin was talking about from the forklift pallet wood, heat treated, HT. HT good, MT bad. Don't lick the MT ones. Me prepping some boards with some oops paint. If you can't find free paint, you go to Lowe's, Home Depot, they have a little rack there of mistake paints or paints they mixed, like my aforementioned baby puke green, that they're selling at a discount. Someone ordered the paint, saw it, I'm not paying for that. They sell it instead of 25 bucks a gallon, it's usually $5 or $7, which is 20 bucks. I have so many cans of paint in my house, it's like a Benjamin Moore outlet. Simple tree stump from a neighbor, skip forward with some weird soda fountain 1950s shop green paint. This is a chair made out of forklift pallets, braced with just a natural maple branch, not quite finished, but just super cheap seating, more or less right angle here, and I forget the angle there at 15 degrees backwards. It's very easy to build something like this. Next one is a...
That looks like a
10-beard. Yeah, this is part of my... See, the luxury... Well, one thing I love about my yard, it's my neighbors are very understanding, and like I said, they actually donate a lot of materials, and anytime I have a workshop, they're over there, just grab a seat and just watch. It's like a circus to them. But my backyard, it used to be a garage under the house, is down a hill, so we have these roaring bonfires. I got tiny houses, little cabins, and experiments everywhere, a mini houseboat I'm working on. You can't see it from the street. So it's one of the reasons I love that backyard. Here's the just simple treehouse stump, making an outdoor table. Don't put it in a tiny house on wheels, it weighs like 300 pounds. Be popping a wheelie. Little cabin, Seth, you were there. Little cabin we're building in my backyard on a super tiny, tiny trailer. People are like, Deek, it looks like a lifeguard stand or an outhouse. It's very small, there's a sleep loft in there, but it works. And one of the reasons I wanted to build something like this was to challenge myself to see what could fit in 48 or so square feet. Another deck built with free materials, forklift pallet woods inside a titanium box that will later hold wine glasses, and it's like an outdoor bar / table. All the windows in there were free and found as well. This is my shed I converted into a rock room for him and I didn't mention this, we shot recently a pilot for HGTV, the show called Waste to Wicked. This production company from New York came out and shot this episode. It was a lot of fun, but they let me pick a team, which is myself, him, a friend of mine who looks like a pirate / Abe Lincoln named Shippy, and our buddy who's 6'10", 360